Director, and this is Blue Rain Gallery's Artist Lecture Series. Thank you for coming out this evening. And more importantly, thank you to those of you who have been coming out for all of our artist lectures. I see familiar faces here in the crowd from last month's lecture and the previous month's lecture, and that's so great. So thank you. I love seeing repeat support for this event. So this evening, Jim Vogel will be presenting to us on the creative process and debunking the myth of the Muse. And I will turn the mic over to him in just a moment, but before I do, I just wanted to remind you all of our next few events here in the Artist Lecture Series. We're trying to program these on the second Tuesday of each month. However, we are skipping the month of August. We just simply have too much going on in August, as I'm sure all of you do too. So in September, we'll be starting it again with Rick Allen, who's known for his glass and metal sculptures of rocket ships. Brad Overton will be presenting here for us in October. His paintings can be seen here in the interior kind of courtyard area. Brad does these really wonderful large-scale portraits of calaveras. They're just stunning, colorful depictions of models that he works with in the studio. Bryce Pettit, he's a wildlife sculptor from Colorado. He will be presenting for us in November, so mark your calendars and come join us for some of those lectures as well, please. So I want to just say a couple words about Jim before I turn the mic over. We are now in our 18th year of representation with Jim Vogel. So we've had a very long and successful history working with Jim. He's one of our more celebrated local painters, and it's a joy to talk about his work every day. Jim is very much a painter of the American scene. I also like to think of him sometimes as a modern day social realist. Jim is probably best known for his affectionate and respectful depictions of ordinary people inspired by northern New Mexico. Jim is native to New Mexico. He grew up in southern New Mexico. So, you know, he has a real love and appreciation for this state. I think that really comes through in his paintings. Characteristics that we all love and appreciate about Jim Vogel's work: the exaggerated extremities, large hands and feet, deep folds in the skin and clothing. These are hallmarks of his painting style. Jim is often painting farmers, laborers, artisans, people whose livelihoods are very much connected to their hands. His works are really not only just beautifully rendered and exquisitely executed, but they're so thoughtful and charming and engaging. He collaborates regularly with his wife, Kristen Vogel, who's sitting here in the audience. Please raise your hand, Kristen. Their collaborative efforts are what are responsible for many of the frames that you see on his pieces. They're often incorporating salvaged items, antique pieces, repurposing them in interesting ways to create these extraordinary, elaborate frames. Jim's work is widely collected, both publicly and privately. Jim's paintings can be found in institutions across the country, including the Booth Western Art Museum in Cartersville, Georgia, the Rockwell Museum in Corning, New York, and the James Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, just to list a few. Jim is an important painter. We're so glad to have him in our stable of artists, and we are very lucky to be hearing from him tonight. So I'm going to turn over the microphone to Jim. Maybe if you just want to switch on your lapel mic.
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Can I get somebody to give me a hand? Don't be scared. Carl, you're tall. It will be appropriate for you to help me. If you'll take those. Since I couldn't get all of you to come up to Dixon, we brought the studio down to you. One more thing. Tape. Oh, we'll bring the magic box out so you can see that too. For those of you that have visited my studio, everything's on wheels. You can move it around easy. Okay, Carl, if you will, hold on to this. Well, we're going to go way out. Yeah, but we're going to go way out. Maybe we need 2 helpers. Okay, Larry, you take that. We're going to go out about 8 feet. That's good. This paper does cost money. Okay, go ahead, Carl. Cut that. All right, if you'll just divide that up and put it on the corners there. Okay, well, let's get on the wall first. A little higher. Just a little higher. Okay. He's got it.
The cup.
Yeah. One more across the bottom. And you guys are hired. One more. Yeah, or just
Exactly.
right there. All right, thanks, guys. Uh-oh. Now what? You know, I told her to be here at 5. She didn't show. I guess that's it, people. The Muse did not show up. But I never asked her to show up anyway, because I don't believe in her or him, but a lot of them believe in her. The way I work is based on a pretty simple motto that I give myself. And that is, to be creative, I have to create. And it's a pretty simple statement, but it means a lot to me. And I don't sit around waiting for inspiration. I just have to make it happen. And by doing that, even if I make a mistake or I make a mess, eventually something good comes of it. And so to do that, what I'll do in the morning is what we did, but I usually don't have assistants. So I'm wrestling tape and big paper all by myself, but I'm used to it. I can hear that tape. But I will just get up, and if I don't have a preconceived notion, I'll just start. And sometimes it'll just be starting off by breaking up the space and trying to figure out what can it be? Or who can it be? And I just start drawing. Anyone? No judgment here. I throw a lot of paper away. One of the benefits that you guys have is seeing the end results and thinking, holy cow, that guy just does some amazing things, which I do. But what you don't see is this. What is it and where's it going? I don't know yet. So I don't rely on the Muse to come and visit me. I have some friends that truly believe in her. In fact, a non-studio or non-gallery artist, Brandon Maldonado, wants to debunk me in another lecture that's called Debunking Jim Vogel's Debunking the Myth of the Muse, Fake News. And that's Brandon Maldonado. He shows here in Santa Fe. Love his work, one of our favorite artists. But I don't know why that guy thinks he can rely on the Muse. So anyway, we've got a few lines here. So we can go a little further and try to figure out, well, is there a figure here? In fact, on the way here, every time we have the pleasure of going through Espanola, New Mexico, one of my favorite small cities or big towns, if we want to see it. And I saw somebody that deserved to be in a painting. Hats. You probably know this about me. God, I love hats. He was waiting across the street there by Walmart, and he maybe had a can in his hand. Okay, Larry, thanks. So then it might happen like that. And I think, oh, there's somebody showing up. And it's not the Muse. She never shows up. I also have another artist friend that believes in the Muse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Eli Levin. He's worked in Santa Fe. He's had his work here for 40 years. He has a really wonderful etching and also an oil or an egg tempera painting called The Artist and the Muse. And it's a self-portrait. He's sitting at his easel. His shoulders are heavy. And the Muse is represented by a thin, naked woman with her hand on his shoulder. But it's like the artist obviously doesn't even know she's there because he's just staring at this blank canvas. So again, she's not reliable for Eli either. Because even when she shows up, he doesn't even notice. So then if I get to a point where there's somebody showing up, I might start fleshing them out a little more. And he also might, be ready to cross the street in Espanola, or maybe I'm going to stick him on Highway 68 between Velarde and Dixon. I don't know. So we give him a little personality, deep lines, sad eyes. He actually had a bucket hat on. And then what I'll do is if I don't actually have the story in my head, I'll give him a story. And that helps me understand who he is and what he should look like. Because I only saw him in passing. And I don't very often stop somebody and ask them, hey, can I draw you? That doesn't go well, ever. So what I do, particularly in Dixon, is I will just sit at the little market we have, or I'll be at the library or somewhere public, and I'll just watch people. And I rarely ask my neighbors if I can draw and paint them, but they do end up in my paintings. Some of them, particularly my old friend Gonito, who has since passed, but he was a Korean War vet. He stood all of, 5'3". And even in his 70s, he would give a judo kick to my chin just to see if I was alert. But he would come and visit me at the studio every day. And even if I was painting a woman, he'd go, oh, that's me. I'm like, yeah, Gonito, you see it, bro, that's you. But he knew he could find me in the studio every day because I'm a professional, and professionals go to work. And actually that's the other part of this, busting the myth of the Muse, is as an artist, I take that responsibility very personally. And what you guys see is the hard work of making these images happen. It's not magic. I just don't have an opportunity for the fairy to come down and tap me on my shoulder and give me a magic idea, or I don't wake up in the middle of the night and jot something down. Although everything I'm telling you is also has a opposite side that it did happen that way. So for instance, there's a movie script writer, and he made a bunch of movie producer, director named John Sayles. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work. Nothing commercially successful, but he often got his inspiration from his dreams. And I'm just like, that's ridiculous. But one time I woke up and I had a composition in my head, and it was crystallized. And I asked Kristen and our son Grayson to pose for me immediately upon getting up. I almost woke them up. It's like, get up, I need you to get up. And they posed for me, and I drew this composition. So that did happen to me once. But that's just the anomaly. Larry, I'm going to fire. I guess I'm not going to hire you, man. But I don't believe in the magic of the creative process. I believe in the work of the creative process. And that's why, like, when I get out here and I start, once I get started, I can feel that it's going to happen. And that part is the muse, is the excitement I get from the process. Leroy, you're putting holes in your wall. That's why I start out with really big paper, because I find the edge. Orlese, give me a ride. And he's taller. So this idea of creativity being work, so I'm going to get vulnerable. And I'm going to tell you guys about when I was young and finishing up high school. And ever since I was a child, I knew the only thing I wanted to do was be an artist. And these two have heard this so much, they're sick of it. But the mythology within my family is that we would all those kids, because I'm number 11 of 12, so there was a gang of kids out playing all the time. And I'd be out there playing with everybody else too, but then all of a sudden I'd just stop, run in the house, get paper and pencil, and I'd draw probably a cowboy or a monkey or a horse or just whatever came into my head. And they were used to that. Like, oh, Jimmy, they called me Jimmy. Jimmy will just like quit playing and go in and draw. Or I would spend a lot of time by myself, which was hard to do in that household, drawing and then finally painting. But then into high school and dealing with high school counselors and with parents saying, you got to figure out what you're going to do. I compromised, and I knew I was compromising at the time. And I thought, well, I got to do something with my talent. I'm not ready to put myself out there. And I wasn't. That's the other thing I see now at 55 is like, yeah, that kid, he couldn't sell art. But what I did is I chose to go to a commercial art school because I bought into this idea that I had to have a career, a profession. And even though in Roswell, New Mexico, there were plenty of examples of professional painters, fine artists making a living. Peter Hurd, his wife Henrietta Wyeth, the whole compound of the artist in residency program down there that was just amazing. And as a child, I took it for granted. It's like, yeah, there's artists. Artists make art and somehow they can buy houses and raise families and eat food, like that works somehow. But then it's like, no, I gotta have a career. I'm gonna graduate. So I went to the commercial art school. And even then I knew it's like, I've compromised, but I gotta do something. And it was there where I met my wife, Kristen Hupfer, and I really, really wowed her. She was very impressed with my skills and my humor. See, she's already laughing. And she and I went through a graphic design program together. We went out into the corporate world. I worked in small design firms doing graphic design, corporate identity and such. Some advertising, she did package design. And all along the way, I knew still in my heart, it's like, I've compromised myself. And I even at one point, I had a client say, well, just do what you want, use your creativity, do it the way you want. And I stopped him and said, no, I do what you want here. Like, I will apply my creativity to what you need. And then along the way, we started having children. This is the last child we had. And I realized I had to do something about this situation because I was working 60 and 70 hours away from home every week. I was grouchy. Those of you that know me well, they're like, Jim's never been grouchy. How could that be? Well, she knows me really well, and she knows I could be grouchy. And I realized at that point I need to stop, make a shift in the plan, and start working in fine art again. So I would paint in the mornings and the evenings and build up a fine art portfolio. At the same time, the owner of the design firm I worked for offered me a partnership. And it was a really great design firm. We did a lot of great work, and we had two kids, one on the way. And I'm like, that's the responsible thing to do. So I went home and told Kristen, and I said, Bob offered me a partnership. And she's like, wow, that's good, right? I'm like, yeah, that's good. It's responsible, right? She said, yeah. And so we said yes, went to Bob. It's like, Bob, let's do this. And he's like, great. And then we went home, and I said, can't do it. So we talked about it, and Kristen, 100% behind me, said, you want to get out, right? You want to quit? And I'm like, yeah. You want to go back to New Mexico, right? I'm like, yeah. She said, let's do it. So I went to Bob, and I said, you know what, this partnership thing, that's great, but you know what I'd rather do is quit. And he's like, really? I was like, yeah, and I want to quit in slow motion. So I want to just take 1 day a week and then take 2 days a week. And he was a great employer, and he says, I'll take whatever days you give me. So in that process, we were able to make trips down here, connect with galleries, get into group shows, and then we jumped off. And, we sold our house in Colorado. We were close to her parents. We packed up a U-Haul. We had bought a tumbling down adobe in northern New Mexico. We go to stay the night at her parents' house before we drive down here, and her dad takes her aside and goes, Kristen, honey, are you okay with this? And she's like, Dad, it's as much my idea as his. So that's how I ended up here today. And one of the things now I realize is I didn't compromise myself, but it was that process of learning how to work with people and hear their ideas out and execute them for them. And then how to compose an image and what's number one for that image, what's number two, what do I want number three to be for that viewer, how to do typography, color composition, what colors do together. All of those things that I was doing for clients actually made me a better fine artist. And there were moments of inspiration. You're like, boy, that's the best logo Omnidia ever had. We all know that logo, right? Well, no, because they went out of business shortly after I designed it for them, but it was the best logo they'd ever had. And that just happened like that, because the Muse visited me that day, and I drew it up and presented it, and they were just like, love it. So yeah, it happened every once in a while, but what really happened was I had to hone my skills, and I had to learn how to look at things differently, and how to read the page, and how to make other people read the page. And then that's really what I do now is use all of those things that I beat myself up for compromising, and they've made me able to do this and this and that and that. And the same goes with like Kristen's ability to compose broken down pieces of furniture and make something like that. Like, holy cow, give me a break. Where did that come from? So in that process too, what I learned to do, or what I was programmed to do, and not just from being a graphic designer, but also from having a German-American dad, is you have a work ethic. And you get up and you go in every day and you put the time in, and when you're putting the time in, you do the best you can do. And even in the most resentful times in graphic design, and I've had some clients later tell me, man, you were mean. Like, you just said, this is it, do that thing, pay your bill, it's done. But I didn't think I was mean. But in that time, I lost my train of thought, is that even when I was frustrated and resentful for having to go into that design studio, I still did the best I could do. And then that plays now into my personal studio, where I go to work every day. I don't think it's work anymore, and I don't think I ever have, but I go to work every day. And I don't go in and wait for the Muse to visit me. I don't look for the Muse in a bottle. I've had that question. I don't look for her in a pipe. Those things, for me, are clouds. And what I get is clarity when I have graphite in my hand and I get an idea in my head because I've been creating to be creative. So then, like earlier I said, you guys don't see the bad ideas, but that's why I do it on paper and pencil first. So I'll work it out and I'll get this basic composition. And when I think it's good, and I'm like, yeah, I can refine this, and this guy's gonna do his thing, and there's probably like a really great lowrider behind him. And maybe he's got his pit bull with him over here. One ear up, one ear down. And I know I have a good composition. I can take this to the next level. And some of you have been to the studio and have seen the pile of drawings that I have, and they're much more refined than this. But I know, like, I can work from here and get a painting done. I might put a little more time into it and refine the drawing. I might actually take it to finish, put it on better paper than this, work out all the values, because I really want to just do that. I just want to draw it out finished. But when I get to that point, I've convinced myself I have a good composition. And I will then transfer it onto a panel. And in that process of doing that, I know what size I'm going to do it. It's like, oh, actually this one has to be 54 inches because I need that little bit of space up here to avoid this tangent with this index finger, because that's horrible. And I'm going to bring it down to about 42. And I actually want to have some motion with the car, so I'm actually going to kind of push it out like this and bring it around, and I get a shape. Or if I'm working with something that Kristen's developing, and while I'm doing this and refining it, I'll make a masonite panel and mount canvas to the masonite. And even in that, I do that with this process that I have done for quite a few years now. And even that part of it is the creative process for me, of applying canvas to a masonite panel. Because Even though I joked that you guys could be my studio assistants, I can't work with other people. I can work with Kristen on her thing, but I can't do that. I have to do it myself. And that way I know if that canvas comes off that masonite panel sometime in the future, that's my fault. I did that. But it won't, because I'm a professional and I figured it out. So even then I get the panel ready and Kristen's working on the frame. And I cheat. I use tracing paper. So I'll roll out a piece of tracing paper and I'll trace the basic cartoon of the composition and I'll transfer it onto the panel. And then at that point, it doesn't matter if I get the colors right, but what I have to do is I have to cover the canvas. I don't want any white yelling at me. It's like this glaring white spot, you know, it's just like, oh, I got to cover it up no matter what, even if it's wrong. And so I just block everything in. And what I do is I have another general rule. I work back to front and big to small. Big spaces first, usually in the back, and then I work towards myself till I'm right on the surface of the painting of what's closest to me. And once I get it all covered, then I can see, is this really, you know, should it be ochre? Should I tone that down? Do I need to break this space up a little more? And then I start refining the colors. And I know it's okay to mess around with those colors because I've got that underlying composition that has structure and I trust it. I might refine a few things. And if you're really astute collectors, which I believe all of you are, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't astute, you might go, oh, yeah, I see where he changed that bib overall a little bit. But that's cool. He left that ridge there, so I know he made that little compositional change. But in that process, it's all a decision I'm making as I'm working. And usually at this point, there's no chance the Muse can come in and help me. She's long off the job. She's done. If she showed up, I'd fire her like Larry and Carl. I'd say, I can't work with you. You're out the door. And I would just, it's the process what I call refinement. So I just keep refining. And sometimes I can get caught up in details. So I have to tell myself, you know, like back off, you know, like the feathers, whew, it's been hours on a single feather, but it's not going to be any better than just the feather I've got there now. So just back off, Jim, give that feather a break. And then at a certain point, this happens on a lot of paintings, and I'm being very vulnerable with you guys. And I go, fuck, this thing is a piece of shit. And I just like, I don't know what's wrong with this. It's just all crap. And I'll leave. And then within a couple hours of the next day, I realize, oh no, I'm just close to finishing. I can come back in and it's just one or two little things that I have to do. And I also learned that that is an important part of the creative process, is leaving the work. And you know, like physically leaving it, not having it in front of me, because quite often it's still in there. It's spinning around. And that's part of the problem of being an artist, huh, Billy's? It's like it's always spinning around in there. And that's why I also look at the creative process as an exorcism for me. Because I get possessed with an idea sometimes. And the only way to be rid of it is to take it to completion and get it from here onto the panel. And then I can move on. And sometimes, particularly now, and I'm sure the gallery people wonder this, I wonder how Jim's doing. September 27th, really close. Huh. And Kristen will be like going, let's see, we've got the poster, we've got the stage, we've got the fortune teller. There will be a fortune teller. We've got all 5 of Vidal's little pictures. What's next after that? I'm like, I don't know, but it'll be there. Because one of the toxic elements for me in the creative process is worry and anxiety. And it doesn't mean I don't worry or that I don't have anxiety about doing it. But what I have had to teach myself is to compartmentalize that, put it aside. It has no place in the studio. And don't let that in while I'm in this process. Because I've never had a good result from worrying about something too much. And it's hard for me sometimes to maybe have empathy with people that worry. And they think, well, you don't worry. You're never worried. You're just always Mr. Laid Back or cool or whatever. Because I know I'm really cool. I come across that really well, right? But it's there. But I just have had to teach myself how to get it over here so I can do this. And invariably there comes a time when Peter just shows up in the next couple of months just to see what's going on. I think somebody is thinking, Peter, maybe you should just stop in on your way to Taos, see if Jim's really working. And he'll come in and he's, I got some coffee. I need to use your bathroom. Look at this. What? For the September show? And I'm like, yeah, Peter, that's what, you'll need to come and pick that up. He's, cool, great. What's on the drawing wall, Jim? And I explained to Peter, and I know they trust me. I know they all trust me, and they know I work hard. But they just like to know what's going on before I just dump it on them. I don't know how long I've been talking. Keep going.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. So the rivers have been high lately, but I've been testing the waters. They're clearing up. The trout will be there soon. Okay. Because I could talk about fishing too. A couple of things about the creative process, since that's what they've paid me to talk about here. Right, Leroy? Paid me to talk about it? All right. A change of perspective is really important. And sometimes people have walked in and my painting's upside down on the easel and I'm actually working on it. And I just like, what are you doing? And it's like, well, I need to see it not for Dr. Locio's face and an elephant in a hand, but just for its shapes. And it breaks the spell that the representational part of the painting has. And I start looking at it compositionally. What else? Beer? The mirror and the beer. Beer only comes into play at the end of the day. I know. The mirror. I will also do that with a mirror. And if you come into my studio, there's a mirror that's about this big on my flat file behind me as I paint. And it's not just because I'm painting and I go. It's because I stand behind it. Well, sometimes I do. She's caught me. But I'll stand behind the painting and look at it through the mirror. And boy, sometimes that just alarms the heck out of me. I'm saying, wow, I had no idea that everything was skewing to the upper right corner or any number of things that could be wrong. Or it's just actually that it's my head behind the painting and I'm like, oh, didn't realize that was there. So having a mirror helps, flipping it upside down and then leaving, literally just leaving. The other important thing is our 2 dogs. They add to the creative process because what they do when they're in the studio is they remind me to stop and walk away, not for the night, but just for a minute or two and move and circulate the blood. And then the other thing that is a constant companion with me, even more so than the dogs or Kristen, but the one thing that's there with me every day when I walk into that studio is a cup of coffee. And then I will share with you, if this works, technology and Jim, right? Oh. My favorite radio program that I paint to, and music is usually in the studio going for me. And sometimes it's not what Kristen wants to hear. Michaela, can you hook me up to the little black box, please? So I have a couple of categories that I listen to. Tom Waits, that's a whole category. And flamenco is more times than not in my studio. And since Michaela's standing up here, and I mentioned Tom Waits, he's one of my go-to people that I talk to see if I'm doing things right or not, even though he never responds to me. They know this about me. So recently Michaela gave me this little portrait she did of Tom. And it's all about inspiration. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with him and his music, but he's a big storyteller. And much to his fault, he also believes in the Muse. And the quote she put on here is, I'll try to do it in his voice. Wait, I need a whiskey and a cigarette. Well, for me, it kind of starts with something amusing. And it occurred to me, like, damn it, that word, abusing, that's amuse. Another story he's told before about this very thing is he's driving down the highway in LA, 6 lanes of traffic, everybody's going 90 miles an hour, and he's just driving, trying to stay alive. And this great lyric comes into his head. It's the best lyric he's had in a long time. And it just pops into his head. And he's driving, and he's like scared, and he's like, oh, and he's looking for something to write with, and he's realized there's no paper, there's no pencil in the car, and even if he tried to write it down, he would kill him in the morning and up into the early afternoon, and then start drawing. Or if I'm not going to paint, I'll just draw all day.
Jane?
I've brought back a memory when you were living in the school, and you told us the story of the nuns from the school used to come and look at, what was happening there. And it seems like you capture the people of northern New Mexico, from the inside out. And that's really wonderful in what you do.
Thank you. Do you want to respond?
Just to clarify, it was just our studio. We didn't live there. No. There was too many scary Catholic ghosts in that school. Anyone else?
Jim, do you have a critic, I might even say a harsh critic, that you go to or rely on for just to see things that you may not see?
Yes, I'll say that again for the benefit of the viewing audience at home. Kristen raised her hand and Michaela pointed at her at the same time. So yes, she's not harsh, but it might go something like this. Oh, are you done with the dog? The response would be, yeah, I'm done with the dog. I'm really happy with the dog. But I might work on him a little tomorrow now. This sounds really egotistical, and it is. But my worst critic is myself. And that gets me back to another thing I forgot to tell you guys in the prior lesson, is I paint just for myself. I don't think about collectors. I don't think about whether the gallery's going to like it. In fact, sometimes that's why they don't get work until it's too late for new work. Because for it to work right for me, I need to just create for myself. And I know I'll do the best job I can. And I also like to look critically at my work, and then I go, oh, good God, I can't believe you did that 5 years ago. So I do like to self-critique, but the harshest and usually the most correct is this person right here, Kristen.
So then my question is the criticism appreciated, not only received, but appreciated, and how does the criticism influence your work, or is there a place when it has to be your own, or how do you incorporate the criticism to hear it, and at what point is it appreciated or not?
Good question.
Again, to demonstrate, it goes something like this. Criticism presented? Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's done. But sometimes I do take it in. A lot of it just depends on, I will listen to her, I may internalize it, I may not respond positively initially, but it may compel me to go back and visit it. Sometimes I look at it and I go, no, I am right, and I am done. And it's nothing against Kristen, and she does have a very good critical eye, which I trust. But there's also times where I know where it's at, and I know every brushstroke and everything I've done to make it exactly what I want it to be. And kind of getting back to that point about doing it for myself is, I firmly believe that if I've done the best job that I feel good about, that it will connect to somebody out there, one of the collectors, one of you guys, and that you'll give it a home, and that you will value it as much as I value it. If we didn't do this for a living, we would have a really, really big museum full of Jim Vogel art. So I just have to trust that when I do it right, and with Kristen's input, or just on my own, that you guys connect to it enough that you want to give it a home and treat it with, you know, the degree of care that I put into making it.
Any other questions? One back here.
Mr. Vogel, is there any work at home that maybe a collector hasn't connected to, but you've connected to and you've kept?
There are a few, and there aren't that many, but there are also the pieces that I'll create for the kids and for Kristen, and tonight 3 of them are actually wearing the most recent pieces I did, because I drew tattoo designs for them, and they had them applied. But there are a few pieces that we've held back and held on to. What I do have all of, or the vast majority, a few pieces are drawings that I've kept for every one of my paintings. And I've traded drawings with some artists. I've given some drawings to people as a gift. But I have kept almost every drawing as an archive for myself to, just note the title and the date when it was created. And paper starts to weigh a lot. There's a lot of weight there in that paper now for 20 plus years. And what I do get requests, like, can I buy your drawings? And I said, well, you can't buy them from me, but when I'm gone, you might be able to buy it from Kristen or Sage and Michaela or Grayson. It's up to them at that point. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Jim, thank you so much. This was really informative and a lot of fun. Thank you.